Everyone, thank you for joining us for today's very special webinar with Bayer. I'm thrilled to introduce Stephen Reiser, his colleague Phil Taylor, Shilpa, and our CEO Simon Hill, who in conversation for the next hour will be talking about Bayer's crop sciences journey with open innovation and providing us all with the insights around how the innovation program works, how specifically they came into open innovation, and a deep dive into the challenges that they've run with us and in Incentive on our open innovation platform. So just a bit of housekeeping, if you have any questions, this is going to be very conversational. We want it to be interactive, so please just pop your question into the question in the chat on Zoom. I'll be picking that up and monitoring those as we go, and we'll also hold some time aside at the end specifically for more questions. But as I say, opportunity as words of wisdom come up to be able to interject, so I'll just be monitoring that. Otherwise, without further ado, I'll hand over to my panel.
Fantastic. And first of all, thank you again, everybody, both in terms of attendees and also from the Bayer side in terms of giving up your time for today's session. I'll just quickly introduce myself. So I'm Simon Hill. I'm the CEO and founder at Wazoku. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Wazoku business, Wazoku is the world's first enterprise solution for idea management and open innovation, powered by our proprietary challenge-driven innovation methodology that drives impactful innovation outcomes for innovation at scale. And we're delighted as part of our knowledge sharing to have been working very closely with the team at Bayer on an extremely interesting and important challenge. One that obviously has gone pretty well as well, which is why we're here talking about it. But for those of you that are perhaps not that familiar with Bayer and what they do and the innovation challenges they face, maybe I'll kick off the conversation, which I do want to keep quite conversational as well. So I'll try not to have it all bouncing back through me, and we'll encourage the panel to talk in and amongst themselves, and hopefully I'll have to do less talking than more. But maybe one of you can kick us off with just an introduction to Bayer generally, and just for the benefit of the audience, what you do and the challenges that you're facing.
Yeah, I can take a swing at that. Thank you, Simon. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Phil Taylor, as you see on the slide, and I'm the Open Innovation Lead at Bayer Crop Science R&D. So Bayer, as a global enterprise, is really focused on our mission of science for a better life. And underneath that, really the idea of our vision is health for all and hunger for none. And so to sort of execute on that, Bayer as a group really has three major divisions. There's a pharmaceutical division, which is really making prescription medications for specific medical treatments. A consumer health division, which makes some of the brands that you know and love, aspirin, Aleve, certain types of Claritin, the antihistamine, products like that are somewhat over the counter and sort of consumer health. And then the third piece where Stephen, Shilpa, and I all sit is the crop science business, is our agriculture side, where we're focused on leveraging biological, chemical, and data tools to improve and drive innovation in agriculture. On the crop science side, more specifically, we're headquartered in Monheim, Germany, and here in St. Louis in the US, where I sit. And Bayer actually, as a crop science business, essentially came to be as it is today with the acquisition of Monsanto 3 years ago. So bringing those two agricultural powerhouses together. So as I say, very focused on sort of the biology, the seeds and traits that we do, the chemistry, crop protection pieces, and then importantly, I think for this conversation and this discussion, the value and the importance of data science and how we can use data as the great integrator to think about innovation in agriculture. And so in order to execute on that, our Climate Corporation division, where both Stephen and Shilpa sit, is really focused on that mission around data science, analytics, and creating those tools and opportunities for our grower customers, and they can speak to that much better than I can. But really, the excitement here is that as an organization, and I know we'll get into this, very focused on open innovation, very focused on the value of external technology to support our different R&D pipelines. And we've had great fun working with Simon and Bea and the team at Wazoku these last few months on the challenge that we're going to talk about today. So hopefully that's a little bit of a flavor. But as Simon said, would love this to be a dialogue. Simon's already said he doesn't want to do much of the talking, neither do I. But so please do, any questions you have, let's get them in the chat and have a great conversation. So hopefully, Simon, that was a reasonable kickoff. Yeah,
it's a perfect kickoff, and we're going to keep emphasizing this as well, right? We can sit here and guess what's interesting to people, and I'm sure that the story is from your side in terms of why and what and how and everything. But equally, if there are burning questions that people have, keep them coming, and we'll interject with answering them. Just in terms of then the specific Climate Corporation division, can we just dig into that a little bit more and just talk about what your remit is and what you're looking to solve for?
Yeah, and so Shilpa and I can take that as well. So so building off of what Phil was talking about, right? So the Climate Core is part of Bayer Crop Sciences. So it's basically the digital arm, if you will, of this traditional agricultural inputs company. So like Phil mentioned, we're an ag company. So we sell things like seeds and chemistry and biological products that can be added to the soil and things like that. But one of the quickly, really evolving areas in agriculture these days is digital farming. We're linking digital solutions, digital tools, digital actually hardware, as well as digital agronomic advice to farming. And so that's what the Climate Corporation does. And so that's what you see in our title. So I'm the strategic innovations and partnerships lead for climate. That's sort of similar to what Phil does for Bayer, but I'm looking for partners that we can work with in the digital side. And this is because it is advancing so quickly. So, examples of imagery analytics from satellites, from drone flights, from, thinking about soil layers and bringing all different types of data layers together to combine it to make a recommendation on how to farm smarter, to either produce more on less land, as well as more sustainably. So imagine, if in a future where we develop products where it tells you where to apply like an herbicide or a pesticide, but more precisely, so you don't spray it across the entire field. So those are the sort of solutions that we're working on and digging into. And so bringing different data layers and different data sets together is a challenge. And we need to assimilate and bring all that data together. But even accessing the data and where it is and things like that can also be a challenge. And that was part of what we were going through here. And so I'm going to ask Shilpa to maybe talk a bit more, because it drills down even a layer deeper than what I'm saying in terms of the challenges she faces and bringing all of this stuff together in the areas of cereals and things like that.
That's great. Thanks, Stephen. So first of all, super excited to be in this platform. This is my first time kind of interactive. So I'm looking forward to seeing the excitement and lots of questions from the audience as well. So yeah, kind of building off of what Phil and Stephen had mentioned about our traditional agriculture business and now going into the digital agriculture space within climate. So my role sits within Climate Corporation, the science division. And what we are trying to do is build, we call them predictive agronomic models. So more around optimizing inputs for the farmers. So traditionally, farmers have been making decisions on what to plant, where to put, how much to put, and when to do it. With the data and advent of these analytics and different artificial intelligence technologies that are out there, we can now try to quantify some of those factors that farmers generally consider, and also quantify the uncertainty that comes with any decision. So for example, decision to spray on a specific date, or I'm a farmer and I'm seeing some disease in my field and I wanna be able to manage that, right? Like, should I spray today? Should I wait a week? Should I wait longer than that? So there are lots of uncertainties, and farmers are thinking through weather, thinking through their logistics, and lots of those factors, which is what we are trying to, like I mentioned, quantify within our teams. We are trying to take into account lots of different data types or attributes that might be influencing occurrence of diseases or pests, weeds, as well as decision to plant a specific type of seed in their fields. So all that information, along with the pieces around environment, right? That's where kind of weather and soil comes in. We take all those inputs in and try to build off these algorithms that can then help grower in terms of decision making. So along those lines, the challenge comes in terms of getting data. It's true, we are generating, like farmers are generating lots of data. Traditionally, we've had a ton of data, right? Like you ask anybody, there's data everywhere. But the challenge comes in having sort of data in a right format, and also data, what I call package, right? Where you have all information that is needed in one place and somewhat organized about a given entity. And an entity in this case would be field. So my team working in cereal crops, and we are trying to develop these solutions, we call them prescriptions, to optimize agronomic inputs at a farmer's field level. And collecting different layers of data, such as soil data, environment, weather data, agronomic practice data, for that specific field, that creates a unique challenge, because not everything exists as a pretty package, right? So we don't learn everything that needs to be learned in order to develop that recommendation engine. And that's where, we kind of start to look around and ask the question, is there more data that's available, the right type of data externally, and can we learn from that and integrate that into our algorithms?
Shilpa, we've had a question going from one of our attendees asking, what made you look at open innovation versus sourcing your solutions internally?
Okay, I can take a stab at it, and Stephen or Phil, you can jump in. Yeah, for me, like I was saying, so this was personally something I really wanted to get this specific data layer, like soils data. The reason for looking externally was because we had exhausted a lot of our internal resources. So a year ago or so, when we started to work within this cereal crop space and decided to develop these different digital agronomic tools, we very quickly stumbled on, all right, you need soils data, right? But soil is where it all starts. You put the seed in and grows. Soil, it influences, of course, the productivity potential of a given field. It influences type of diseases, the water availability, lots of different things. So it definitely starts with the soil data layers. And as we ask the question internally, what type of data do we have that we can start to feed our models and learn from it? Very quickly, we realize we don't have the data at the scale and the resolution that we really need to power our models. So that's when I remember reaching out to Phil, I don't know, 6-8 months ago, and just through different colleagues, and like, okay, what do we got in this country, that country? Because Europe it's big. And we have multiple different target countries that we are working within. So that's when this idea was floated. Okay, can we look externally, right? Are there any publicly available data sources that we can leverage? So we looked at that as well, but again, the question was the scale and the resolution. We just could not get it. And combined with that, the challenge was, of course, I speak English, I can read English. In Europe, different countries, different languages, you get restricted. I can't Google around things and understand everything that comes back. So that's when we were like, okay, what's possible? And I don't know if it was Phil, you brought this up, this opportunity through incentive through Wazoku, and we're like, let's try it. I mean, this was very first time. To be honest, I didn't know what we would expect. But the reason for that, like I mentioned, was the gap that we couldn't fill with internal resource, internal information that we had available, as well as publicly available information. So we decided to give it a try. Yeah.
But to reinforce what Shilpa was saying, like what was really neat to watch about this was just some basic things that Shilpa mentioned. Yeah, there's the technical piece, but there was just simply things like language barrier, and there was geography and geopolitical in terms of so in the United States, there's very well organized data sets on soil layers and things like that, which is what Shilpa was after. But that's not the same, around the world, right? And so it's hard to sort of just find it in some instances. Each country may do it differently, or they may not do it at all. And so not only was it a way, so turning to this platform, there was language, there was country-specific requests. There were things like what was public and sponsored by a government versus what might be privately held as well, that people might know about that we didn't have a line of sight on, and things like that. So it was pretty neat to sort of say, well, let's see what the world can teach us, and see what's out there that we're not able to dig up on our own.
And the good thing is we've kicked off with lots and lots of questions, because they're now coming in abundance. So I'm going to have to run through. And it'd be great just to hear interesting questions come in around understanding, and this attendee said they understand the value of data and data analytics to agriculture, but can someone please expand on the connection of the Climate Corporation work to climate? So how does this all interplay?
So like I mentioned it really quickly, and maybe it felt a little glossed over. So I'll try to say it again. We're basically the digital arm or digital division within Bayer Crop Science. So we are, climate is basically a wholly owned subsidiary or a group within Bayer Crop Science that works on digital tools for agriculture. And it's as easy as that. Obviously, there's other teams within Bayer Crop Science that do other things as well, given the size and the enormity of the company. But that's what we focus on within climate. So the Climate Corporation is part of Bayer, and it's just focused on some of these digital solutions to help our farmer customers on this digital platform, as like Shilpa laid out as well. So what does that encompass? We're trying to build models like Shilpa is in terms of where to place seed better on a farm by combining all these different data layers. We're trying to build tools on more precise application of pesticides, so that you don't have to go and apply it across the entire field and things like that. So bringing all different pieces of digital technology together, if you will, to advance not only outputs, but as well as farm smarter and more sustainably in the future.
Fantastic. And an interesting one that I find particularly interesting is someone cited here that crops is a business run in a physical world, i.e. it has a physical attributes, but digital data has very few, if any, physical attributes. So how do you correlate something, be it a seed, with physical attributes with something like weather science data that has no intrinsic physical attributes?
That's a fun question, and she'll pile on more, but think about it, right? So that's really neat. So so the seeds are physical. Shilpa was talking about soil layers. So soil is physical. Soil is not soil. Dirt is not dirt. There's all different types of soil, if you will. There's a clay soil, there's a sandy, grainy soil type. They drain differently. They're able to hold water differently. The organic matter or the nutrients in the soil differ by the soil type. So those are all physical things, like whoever asked the question. How do you digitize that? Well, then you monitor soil, or you can examine soil by a satellite, or physically you can actually look at soil composition, and you can create a soil map, if you will. And that soil map using satellite imagery or remote imagery then becomes digitized. It becomes a digital layer, it becomes zeros and ones, and it's described. And the attributes of that soil are then organized and put together as a data table. And that's the sort of information Shilpa was looking for, because then how that seed, if you will, or even a chemistry performs on that soil can vary. And so you might want to change how many seeds per, I'll say, square meter, or basically the density of planting, or which variety of a seed performs better in one part of the field and not another. And as far as a chemistry, how one chemistry may perform better on a certain type of soil versus another type of soil in terms of acting as a weed barrier. Those are all physical attributes that are relying on this digital data set, if you will. Shilpa, do you have more to maybe better examples or other examples to that?
Yeah, I think you described pretty well. So in my world, I will call it like the genetics by environment by management interaction, right? So you might have so I guess the physical attribute part of it, that is the genetics, right? That's your seed. That's the intrinsic ability of a given seed to grow and then lead to a certain level of productivity yield at the end of the season. However, through this season, as this plant is growing and developing, we are characterizing it, right? We're seeing its interaction with a given environment, be that soil environment, be that a certain type of weather that's happening in that field. And that measurement that we are doing, and we could have sensors in the soil, right, that are measuring multiple different things, and this interaction of a genotype with a given environment, that measurement is then digitized, right? And that becomes this gobs and gobs of data that we are collecting and then trying to understand how this one variety worked within this environment under these management conditions, right? From the agronomic practice standpoint. And that three-way or four-way interaction that we see is what we try to build these models off of. And that's what the models learn about, okay, which environment, which management practice will fit better for a given genotype, so that we can place this particular variety in a piece of land that where it's going to maximize its potential, right? So genetic potential is fixed, but then how do we, from the characterization that we have done for that particular genotype, build out this prediction that it's going to maximize the genetic potential. So yeah. I really like that question. I think it's very interesting one to tackle.
So thank you, and I think we've dived quite deep into some of the background and some of the remits of the team here. I might pull us back out maybe 1,000 feet or so, and just maybe go to Phil, just to. Can you just give us a context of your role of kind of global open innovation lead, right? So what is it that you're here to try and achieve, and sort of walk us through this journey where we'll get to the point of kind of where we really came in, and sort of run through that case study in a bit more specific.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I appreciate that, and I see a couple of questions in both the Q&A and the chat where I think this line of conversation will help address. So when you think about open innovation and external innovation, when we think about it as part of Bayer as a whole, of which of course climate is a key part, to me it's really embedded in our DNA, right? There's a comment in the chat about the risks in partnering and the risks of sharing and not doing things internally in yourselves, and to be honest with you, I maybe it's just my bias and my perspective, but I turn that completely on its head and say I think there's tremendous risk in not doing that, because we know, I mean, the challenges facing agriculture, I think if you've learned nothing from Shilpa and Stephen's comments the last 4 or 5 minutes, is agriculture is phenomenally complicated, right? A farmer, a producer makes 40 to 50 decisions through that growing season, and any one of them could completely derail his ability to produce a good crop, right? And so the complexity of agriculture means that the level of innovation that's needed to help it advance is really quite high. And so we know, even though, and it seems sort of braggish to say it, we've got the largest R&D organization in the industry, we still know we can't do everything by ourselves. We don't have the expertise, we don't have the scale, we don't have the depth. And frankly, we don't have the agility sometimes to get ahead of the 8 ball and sort of understand what's coming next, what's the next big trend. And so we're really focused on asking the question, how can we use external innovation to really look at this through a couple different lenses? How can we use it to help us see what's coming and adopt the next great technology and the next great opportunity that's could be a really impactful product, but maybe isn't quite ready for a big investment internally. But also it's a great tool for being able to really drive focus. Over the last few years, through our Leaps division, another sort of part of Bayer that's our venture capital group, we've made investments in a number of startups deliberately designed to accelerate a specific innovation, but do it in a way that's essentially ring-fenced and protected from Bayer, and so isn't likely to get cut or deprioritized or adjusted. It's sort of protected, right? And so you can focus, the startup can focus on the one thing it's trying to do and deliver that, and then it can become part of the greater organization. And so it's really just about saying, how do we leverage the ecosystem and how do we leverage what we're able to support our pipeline? So my role in that is really to be at the very front end of that and ask, what's going on externally and what ecosystems, whether it's geographically or technically, should we be active in and contributing to and helping out to support those early innovations so that they're ready to come into the pipeline when the time is right. And so that's where we work with the folks here at Wazoku. Obviously, we're a key part of our open innovation strategy. And I think there was a question in the chat, where did Wazoku come into this? But essentially their platform and their ability to help us address this question that we weren't able to answer internally. We'd looked at our own data sets. We'd asked across the teams. I mean, Bayer is a big company, but even still, we can't always find the answer. And so it gave us an opportunity to look outside and say, okay, what are we missing? What can we learn? What's out there that we can bring in? And so I think I have one of the best jobs in the company, right, where I get to do that kind of thing and run those kinds of programs across a number of different geographies, across a number of different technical areas, and with a number of different external organizations, to really try to answer some big questions about what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do as an organization, and I think it's been very successful. I mean, I was with the legacy Monsanto for 13 years before the Bayer acquisition, and there was a time when you looked at our product portfolio, and every single product offering we had an element of technology in it that was sourced from outside of the company. So it's very much in our DNA that external partnering and external interactions are critical to our success. So love doing this kind of thing, and hopefully we do more of them.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Phil. And it'd be great just to hear a little bit more about the actual Open Innovation Challenge, just from your perspective, that specific question you were trying to address, and kind of your process end to end as you went through that.
I can maybe say a couple comments about the process. I think Shilpa's the one to talk about the topic. This is, if I do that, I'll butcher it. But I think the fun thing about working with the Wazoku team here is really, we came to them with a concept. We sort of came to them and said, look, we know we've got a geography we need to look at. We know we've got this sort of idea of a question. We know there's something out there, but we don't exactly know how to plug in. And to me, this is one of the key values of this type of exercise is that the D and others, and that I'm forgetting the names and I apologize, but the team at Wazoku really helped us understand how to ask the question we were asking. And so we had several conversations with them and sort of reframing the question and pressure testing different aspects of it. And so by the time we actually put the challenge out there through the platform, at least from my layman's perspective, it didn't look anything like the question we came in with, right? It kind of evolved as we went through it, and really helped us frame up what it was we were trying to identify.
And to that, sorry, Phil, just to cut you off, but there's a topical question actually for how
Sure.
do you go about identifying those specific themes or topics for your challenges?
So one of the fun parts of my job is getting to spend time with folks like Shilpa, just trying to understand what problems they have and where there could be an opportunity for open innovation. I would say internally, that's the key element or the key thing that I spend my time on is essentially talking to my stakeholders inside and saying, okay, you're trying to do X. Well, maybe a challenge with Wazoku might be the right answer. It was in this case. For other challenges and other sort of opportunity, or I like to think of them as opportunities, but other sort of challenges we have inside the company, maybe we need to think about a funding program or some sponsored research or a license in of a technology. You know, there's all kinds of tools in the toolbox. Crowdsourcing like this is just one of them. And so my job is essentially to be that sort of pinch point to say, okay, here's a whole list of things we need to try and accomplish. Here's the toolbox we have to apply to those challenges. What's the right tool that meets in the middle? And sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 different tools to get to where we want to be. But that's really what I spend my time doing, is listening to the technical folks like Shilpa and her teams, and sort of saying, oh, I think I can help with an open innovation opportunity. Let's try it. Let's see what we can do together. So that's kind of the internal process. And then, you know, I also get to have the privilege of sort of managing those relationships outside and say, okay, let's go work with Wazoku. Let's go set up something with a university here or a startup or an accelerator there. I don't know, hopefully that answers the question. If it doesn't, people can keep shouting at me.
Yeah, I interjected mid-flow there because we were saying about the challenge identification. You're saying before I caught you that actually there was what you went in thinking was the problem or opportunity was actually pretty different to once it had been through the challenge design process, what actually came out the other end.
Yeah, I think what I really mean to say of that is how we talked about it, right? Because it's one thing for, you know, a corporate talking head to say this is my problem, but that's got to be translated into something that the external ecosystem that resonates with them, and that they see a way to engage in it, right? Because it's back to Shilpa's point about the language barrier, right? It kind of was really helping us say, how do we say what we're trying to say in a way that the external ecosystem will go, oh, I can help you with that. I'll submit. So it wasn't, I guess it wasn't so much, sorry, maybe I didn't say it very well. It wasn't really that the problem changed. It was the articulation became more externally relevant.
Yeah, I can jump in. Sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
Well, just to add to Phil, you know, that's where, you know, he had mentioned the and as well as there was Kelly, and it was just translating our words into the type of challenge. Right. It was just you know, you guys made it like really easy for us. You know, you have different categories of challenges, you fit it into the right category and how it would work. You know, you go and you look at the different products that you offer, different types. You know, there's a few things, but it's not really clear, you know, how you would maybe approach it. You know, we worked with the team, and you know, your team really like put it into words, if you will, for, you know, how it could be communicated to folks outside who maybe aren't like aren't super deep on the topic, like Simon was mentioning. You know, Shilpa and I went a mile deep, you know, right away on this call, right? And so how do you translate and bring that up to, you know, a 10,000 foot level to have a global audience, if you will, react to it? You know, setting up the reward structure, things like that, and bringing the data in. It really was, to Phil's point, that was really neat about it. It was, you know, sort of the ease of being able to get it set up and going, and relying on the experience of Wazoku to do that for us.
And thank you, Simon, thank you, Stephen, for remembering Kelly's name. I'm sorry, it was on the tip of my tongue, and it was, you know, because he was such a great help to
I think there's 2 ways we could go with the conversation now, and both of them are quite important, I think. So one is, and it's great we've got people on that we're doing this for the first time, because I feel like you assume probably a lot and know not so much coming into this, and I think there's a huge learning curve through, you know, running one of these challenges. Lots of people on the call probably haven't done one, so I thought maybe I might just start there. Is kind of, you know, so we've got someone who knows this toolkit quite well, and I'm sure is surprised and still has to deal with the organizational angst each time you want to do one of these things. So just kind of walk through the steps of what the practicalities are really of actually running an open innovation challenge from the seeker side, right? The person with the problem, the organization you've got to contend with. And I'd also be interested in the side of the people that don't do this as their day job, but had to come in and do it for the first time.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think within Bayer, it's kind of we're sort of lucky, you know, as I said, the idea of looking externally is not foreign or alien to us at all, right? And so the conversation about, well, why don't we look outside? That's not a difficult one. That one's sort of there. That's immediate. We can run. I think what we needed to do in this case, or where it made sense, was just to think about what we were able to do from a reward perspective. You know, we sort of had to go through the question of, do we have the budget to do it? What's the mechanics? You know, how do we get this sort of set up? And then really just jump in and get on with the sort of the technical conversation. So it's pretty streamlined from my perspective. And obviously this is my opportunity to say what great coworkers I have, because they're so much fun to work with, right? Because it's just easy in that sense. And I think it's a key thing that I like to evangelize, for want of a better word, is that, you know, looking externally and trying to take open innovation approaches isn't as hard as it looks. And for organizations who don't do it, or don't do it very often, it's certainly worth jumping into and giving a try, right? Because we knew, and that's one of the nice things that comes out of these kinds of conversations, is we can't really lose. Right, the chances of us finding something are pretty high, and I think we're really happy with the outcome of the challenge here. But we wouldn't have lost anything really if it hadn't been successful. I think there was a question in the Q&A about, would we have found the solvers, you know, if we'd not used the approach. I don't know, but I know it would have taken a heck of a lot longer and probably cost an awful lot more than it did doing it this way. And so there is a little bit, I think there is a little bit of that value proposition conversation that goes on inside the company. Okay, we're going to spend some money doing this. You know, is that the right decision? Does that make the most sense? But really, it's not that hard once you realize both the volume of applications. I mean, 126 solvers. I mean, we were really pleased to see that, right? That's a pretty broad swath, a bunch of countries, a bunch of different perspectives. So, I don't know what else sort of to add there, Simon. Happy to say some more things if you think there's something to talk about, but it's kind of helpful that we're already one step in, and then we can just sort of run with it.
Yeah, no, I think that's super helpful. Maybe just the time it took from, you know, when someone came to you through to end of solution, and then I think let's dive right into the specific challenge before time bites us.
I don't know. I think it was probably 6 months end to end. Right, but I think
a lot of that drag was on our side, right? I mean, our internal processes of being in a big organization and getting all the approvals and things like that. So.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think it was probably about a 6-month process, but it would be significantly less than that next time. Right, and a lot of it was, as Stephen says, it was tactical and logistical. 2020 was a year of fairly significant change for Bayer Crop Science, certainly in the US, as we were coming out of the integration with Monsanto. And so every time I tried to pay a bill, the process had changed, and so there was a lot of mechanical angst. But you know, these things can be done, I think, relatively quickly. I think probably the biggest time aspect strategically to think about is almost how long you leave the challenge open, right? Because that obviously, you know, that was a good conversation with the Wazoku team about how long we left this open, because you want to give people time to think about it and realize they have something and put it in. So it took a while, but my hope would be next time it'll be a little quicker.
Yeah, I mean, just to add from my side, right, from technical team's perspective. So as we had exhausted the internal sort of information resources, and we were starting to think about externally, it was quite easy. I mean, I know Stephen and Phil, so easy to reach out to them. I know their roles, and they are very well connected and can give us some ideas. So that's kind of how it started. So when I reached out, I'm like, help us, because we need this data, and we are currently seeing it as a gap. That's when Phil brought this up. And from that point on, once we kind of zeroed in on we want to go with Wazoku, from technical side, I don't think it took much longer. From us, it was defining what we want. That piece took some time. You know, we really needed to figure out or can be specific about what do we want. Do we want exactly the data, or do we want information about the data, right? So those are two different pieces. So we decided, let's start with learning about the data, where the data is, what type of data there is for the target countries that we are interested. And from there, the next step would be figuring out what is the data and how do we access it and everything else. So in terms of the Wazoku team, I really want to commend the team. So Kelly and Dee, they really helped us refine the language of the challenge itself. So we had written it much more technically, right? And as Phil was pointing out early on, for the external audience, it has to be, they should be able to understand and interpret what we are asking. So there was quite a bit of refinement process that was done, and Kelly did a really great job at it. Once he drafted or took our recommendations in and kind of polished them or refined them so the external audience can react to it, it was really fast. And after that, it was purely logistics that took the time.
And can we look then at, so we've got some of the statistics up on the screen. Maybe you guys can talk a little bit to not just the numbers that are there, but sort of what you learned through this process. Were there any surprises, or positive or otherwise, that you got back from it, and anything else you can share about the submissions that you received?
Yeah, I could start. So for me, a surprising thing was the global nature of the solvers. I just hadn't realized how widespread that would be. We were talking about the soil data in Europe that to select countries, and here we have solvers from different parts of the world, right? Pretty much every other continent, right? So that was the surprising part, which again, back to crowdsourcing, I think that's great. That's phenomenal. Anybody in, say, I don't know, India, for example, it could be helping us identify the sources in Germany or Poland, where we are looking. So that was very kind of a positively surprising thing for me. Another aspect, the solutions that we received, I'm trying to recall, were there 8 or 10 that were finalized through the process. So there were quite a few beforehand. Yeah, and then we filtered them. So the Wazoku team, they helped us filter them based on the criteria that we had put forward. And then my team, we had a panel internally, they evaluated the solutions. Some of them were very detailed. It was amazing. It's like a research paper, right? Somebody had gone through the process and really diligently looked at every piece of information that they could find and then stitched it all together in a neat report. Impressive. I was bowled over. And then there were some, they had tried to provide the solution, but they were not as comprehensive. They were perhaps targeted to one or the other countries, because within this, the Earth Challenge, we had asked for, I believe, 10 countries where we're looking for specific information. And so, yeah, some were very targeted, some were not as extensive, right? They're giving us little bit of the information, but not holistically as we would like to see. So we had established 10 or so criteria to evaluate these proposals early on when we drafted the challenge. And so that's what we used to screen them and identify these 2 solvers who did a really great job in terms of listing out the information that we were looking for.
Have you done any work with the solvers post that challenge?
Not yet. So it was really good to see that we got the information that we needed. But then again, my point about language. So there were some of the resources that are coming in, or the list, the information, say, around Poland, or I believe Ukraine was there, maybe Italy, different countries with different languages. And my team needs some time. We are enrolling some of the colleagues in those countries, their colleagues who can help us translate some of that information. So then my team can ingest and start to look at the data pieces of that. So we haven't reached out back to the solvers. We're still in the process of looking at the information that was provided and kind of validating and reviewing it.
That's another learning, which is pretty obvious as you look at the approach, which is, this is the start, if you will, particularly in the form of the challenge, that we put out there. We were looking for information, so we received information. So now really it's now, like with any information, what do you do with it? And so you have to dig in deeper and you have to analyze it. And I like what Shilpa said, even some of the reason we did it this way to avoid some of the challenges are also some of the challenges we have going forward, just the translation of the web pages and understanding the information and getting in contact and things like that. So in the way that we set this up, it's a start. And so Simon said, the good and the bad, it's really neither. It's a start. It's a starting place of things that we were looking for, and being able to take the next step is what we need to do.
Fantastic. And just some more questions from our crowd. So if you were to do this again next time, what would you do differently?
I was reflecting on that one as it came in. I think there's a couple of things that we've touched on, and as I think about what I would want to tell a team like Shilpa and Stephen going into this, some things that are that I would do differently. One is maybe prepare the team a little more for the process in terms of like, we're going to go through this and it's going to look a lot different, and then that's okay. Understand what that front end process is going to look like, but also make sure, and in this case, I think we were fine, but I've seen this trip up in other examples. Essentially, to Stephen's point, make sure we're ready to do the work on the back end, right? And make sure that we're either resourced or we know we have the time, or that we're set up, that really make sure we're talking about this exactly as he says. I love it, as the start point, not the end point. So it's making sure it fits into our process a little bit. I'd be talking more about those aspects. Those were things that were kind of learnings for me as we went through this. But
what is your feeling, Phil, generally about where the open innovation approach that Wazoku takes fits in specifically to the various jigsaw puzzles of various opportunities or challenges, as you want to think about them from Bayer? How do you go about trying to spot one of those?
I think it's a question of, let's see, what's a good way to think about it? It's really where it's those challenges that we don't have the expertise to address directly ourselves, and whether that's from a technical or frankly a reach perspective. I mean, I think I was surprised as Shilpa was that we got such a global response here, but really part of it was we're three American-centric innovators trying to look for an answer in Europe, right? And so that was immediately like, oh, we need to sort of think outside the box a little bit here. We don't have a team on the ground in Europe that can help us deliver this. What's a way to do it? So it's finding those little aspects of a question or aspects of a challenge where it's like, oh, here's something that we could really pull in from the outside, right? It's complementing the gap that we have. And so I like the way you put that, Simon. It's a little bit like looking at it as a jigsaw puzzle and saying, oh, here's a piece of it, right? We might have 8 pieces already, but here's the 9th, and so just trying to think through how that works is really important. Sorry, Stephen.
As well, having gone through this, now working with Kelly and Dee, they were pointing out the different types of challenges that we can put out there, like the categories. And I think it's more of an appreciation of going after information like we did here versus a very specific solution to a specific problem. So Simon, I would say also, being clear on what it is exactly you're going after. And I like Phil's comment about resourcing after and my own observation that it's a starting point and things like that. But it really, in a way, it sort of depends on your challenge. And so what I appreciate here is there's a flexibility in this open innovation sourcing that you can go different directions with it, right? From something fairly broad, as the case was here, to something very, very specific. If, from this work, you could imagine that, okay, we get to a certain point in a year and now we have a very specific question about it. Do we come back to this, this platform and say, well, let's try to address the question there because we couldn't figure it out ourselves and things like that. So I like how there's different structure and ways of doing it.
No, I agree. I think that the analogy I would use here is a little bit the difference between us coming to you and saying we're sitting in London and we need a car, versus saying to you we're sitting in London and we're trying to get to Edinburgh, right? And actually we don't even really know what the answer is going to look like. And if we ask the question in that way, said, okay, we need to get to Edinburgh, then we could talk about any number of different ways to do that, versus if we ask a car, we'll get a car, right? And so it's helping us get a little bit more breadth on the thinking, because the one thing that I'm fascinated with agriculture is I'm fairly convinced that the next great breakthrough from an innovation perspective in agriculture is going to come from someone who doesn't think about ag at all. Right, it's going to come from a completely adjacent or even tangential field. And so by framing up these sort of questions in a way that folks can resonate and engage with in different ways, we're going to bring technologies in from medical fields, aerospace engineering. I mean, who knows what it might be. So it's to get that broad look, I think, is really key to this.
Someone has made quite an interesting comment to that, saying, how about if you were to look at it the other way around and go about asking, rather than, this is the Bayer saying, what's the challenge I'm trying to solve? If you were to ask people, what challenge can you solve for us? So actually to flip this completely on its head and say, bring us a solution, really.
So I think I was looking at that, and if you and Stephen can probably comment on this too, but I think if you take the digital piece out of that, if you think about it from the seeds and traits and the crop protection, we do that. Right, absolutely, and run programs that are paint a very broad picture of what we think is important to deliver in agriculture. Not here's a problem, but here's more of an opportunity statement of we're trying to make sure we can support growers in this way or that way. What do you have that could contribute to that? And we run a couple of different programs that speak to that aspect too. So I think the inside out and the outside in approaches are both equally relevant. I think the thing that I found though is what you find when you take more of a outside in approach, where you position it from the what challenge can you solve, the solutions or the sort of concepts that come from that are potentially much earlier in their development and their potential readiness, right? So there's potentially more work to do to get them out to being a product and actually getting something out of the door, but it certainly doesn't mean they're not valuable. It's just a different type of engagement that's probably a little higher risk, a little earlier. Maybe it's a smaller investment on our side out of the gate, because we don't really know where it's going to go. But no, it's completely part of the approach. I really appreciate the question. It's a good one.
Stop.
Sorry, I just as I was finishing my question, I got invaded by my kids. That's why I quickly leapt for the mute button. I don't know if you heard it or not. Apologies, everyone.
Very slick, Simon. Perfectly done. You've
just got there in time. I thought time flies when you're having fun, right? So we're kind of coming up on the hour. I have a question that I think is quite an interesting one that we always struggle with, and I think Phil, maybe you'll lead on this one a little bit. Is how open is the business, right? So you've got this role, you're encouraging different ways of thinking. How open is the business writ large to more open ways of working? You said there are some administrative and sort of process battles, but how do you find working this approach into the business, and what have you learned and experienced?
Oh, I think we know it's an integral part of what we do. I mean, we wouldn't staff the team that I sit in the way that we do if it wasn't a key part of R&D. One of the key things actually they did post the Bayer integration with Monsanto was actually put a leader on the R&D leadership team solely focused on open innovation, which we had never had before, right? So it's embedded and it's part of it, and they. I probably overplayed the challenges and the battles there, but they were much more mechanistic than they were scientific or strategic, right? It was it's a key part of it, and it will continue to be that way, because we know we've seen the success from it. We've seen the success delivered from our partners in the past, and so we know it needs to stay part of it. So that's the nice part about my job, is I don't have to convince anybody of that. We can just jump straight into what we want to try to do.
What about Shilpa or Stephen from your side? Like this was you had a challenge you're trying to solve for. Did you come at this with yeah, this is absolutely right, or were you hesitant and nervous sort of coming into this and had to get through either it was personal hurdles or organizational hurdles to actually go forward with it?
None from my side. I just want to comment. It was, very easy to say. Once we decided we need to go external, from there it was smooth sailing. I don't know, Stephen, if you had to convince our senior leaders, but I didn't feel any hesitation or even pauses from my leadership. It was very, very easy from my point of view.
Yeah, there was absolutely no block whatsoever. It's still sort of mentioned, it's part of our culture. So being able to do this was actually, it was welcome. The challenges that I mentioned were truly administrative, was getting the bills paid and things like that, and getting contracts and things like that. So the only hesitancy I personally had was like having never done it before. So again, the InnoCentive team, that led us through it, made it really easy to do, and the approach. People were curious, the leadership was curious, what would come of it? What would we actually get back? And let's talk about the value afterwards and things like that.
Yeah, and to be fair, from my perspective, I didn't know what we will get, right? I just didn't know what to expect. So it was pretty much going in. And from I think if I could recall my 7 years with the company, maybe this is the first time we did crowdsource challenge. I'm aware of the partnerships that we do with the universities or other forums or companies, but I don't recall something at this scale, just going through this crowdsource type of challenge that we posted out there. So that's why there wasn't any precedent to follow, like what to expect. Are we gonna get what we're asking for? Maybe we'll get it, maybe we won't. So it was just very open mind. Let's try and see. And I must say, I was pleasantly surprised, given, we got like I mentioned, 5 or 6 solvers solutions that we evaluated. But out of that, 2 were pretty good, and we couldn't actually, they were tied in terms of the information that was provided. So it was really good information that we wouldn't have found. Maybe we would have if we gave it, I don't know, 5 years, but we wouldn't have found in the time that we did through this challenge. So it was a really pleasant surprise. And now we know what to expect.
Fantastic. And that's pretty much our time.
Yeah,
so,
I was going to say the last minute, but just I know that you've got your details that we'd like to share with everyone as well. There's been an abundance of questions which we haven't been able to answer, so just some more information for our crowd here, if they can continue the conversation with you.
Yeah, please. I mean, we've got our open innovation site up on LinkedIn, our Life Hub, which is our physical open innovation locations around the world. So we have our Life Hub Crop Science page, so please follow that on LinkedIn, where you'll hear news and events that we're running from an open innovation perspective. And absolutely, please do connect with me or others on LinkedIn or Twitter, however you want to get hold of us. We're open to partnering, right? That's our jobs, that's our mission. So always happy to connect and talk some more. I yes, I see all the other questions that came in. I'm sorry we didn't have all the time to address them, but hopefully we hit the most important stuff.
Absolutely. Great.
Thank you for hosting us.
Great.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Thank you everyone for your time. And yeah, we will share the questions with the Bayer team. So if there are any that we didn't get to, we may be able to come back with some more answers as well offline. So thank you everybody, and look out for future knowledge sharing webinars that we may be running as well as an organization. Otherwise, stay well, stay healthy, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.